A $4 million Russian main battle tank rolls at the front of the column. Behind it, nearly 24 armoured vehicles stretch down the dirt road. Infantry fighting vehicles, armoured personnel carriers, naval infantry packed inside steel hulls. To the commanders inside, this looks like the opening move of a breakthrough. What they don't know is that the entire corridor ahead has already been measured, mapped, and turned into a firing solution. But before we continue, there's one thing worth asking. Why would Ukrainian forces appear weak in this sector unless they wanted the Russian assault column to come this way in the first place? The answer began days earlier. High above southern Ukraine, a silent reconnaissance drone circles at 6,000 meters. It's the Bayraktar TB2, a relatively small aircraft, but equipped with electro-optical sensors capable of spotting vehicle tracks, heat signatures, and movement patterns across miles of terrain. For 48 hours, it watches the same dirt corridor, the same narrow lane between two fields of soft mud. Ukrainian analysts notice something interesting. The soil surrounding the road cannot support heavy armor. Too wet, too soft. A T-72 main battle tank weighs nearly 45 tons. The newer T-90 main battle tank weighs even more. If those vehicles leave the road, they sink, which means any armoured assault will be forced into single-file formation. One vehicle behind the other. No room to manoeuvre. That observation changes everything. Instead of defending the corridor, Ukrainian planners decide to invite the attack. They thin out visible positions, reduce radio traffic, allow reconnaissance drones to spot what appears to be a gap in the defensive line. To Russian intelligence, the sector suddenly looks vulnerable, too vulnerable to ignore. At 0530 hours, the assault begins. Russian naval infantry and airborne units move forward. Engines rumble. Tracks grind against the dirt road. The column stretches nearly a kilometre long. Tanks lead. Armoured troop carriers follow. Artillery support waits miles behind the front line. To the Russian commander, everything looks routine. But Ukrainian forces already know every metre of the route. Observation drones hover overhead. Listening stations monitor radio chatter. Satellite imagery confirms the formation. The corridor is no longer a road. It is a kill zone. At 1.2 kilometers from the Ukrainian line, the column slows. There is a small bend in the road, a natural bottleneck. That is exactly where Ukrainian planners expected them to be. Hidden inside a tree line sits an anti-tank team armed with the FGM-148 Javelin. Cost of the missile? Roughly $80,000. Target? A tank worth more than $4 million. The operator locks the seeker. The missile launches. A sharp burst of smoke. Then silence, as the weapon accelerates toward the lead vehicle. Speed climbing past 250 meters per second. The crew inside the tank never sees it. Impact. The shaped charge detonates. The explosion rips through the vehicle's armor and shreds its track assembly. The tank stops instantly, burning, blocking the road. And with that single strike, the entire Russian assault column freezes. Vehicles behind the wreck grind to a halt. Drivers attempt to reverse, but there is nowhere to go. Mud on both sides. Heavy armor trapped on a narrow strip of solid ground. Within seconds, the assault formation becomes a traffic jam of steel. High above, a Ukrainian observation drone captures the moment. Coordinates update instantly. The data flows into Ukrainian artillery systems positioned kilometers away. The grid had already been calculated days earlier. All they need now is confirmation. 30 seconds later, the first artillery shells arrive. Explosions tear through the trapped vehicles. Fragments slice through lighter armoured carriers. Drivers panic. Infantry dismount. Smoke fills the corridor. Inside the Russian column, radios erupt with overlapping transmissions. Units shout for orders. Commanders attempt to coordinate movement, but everyone is speaking at once. The command network collapses under its own noise. At 90 seconds, a second artillery volley lands. This one more precise. The coordinates have been refined. Shells detonate directly between the stalled vehicles. The road becomes a cratered killing ground. Russian infantry react the only way they can. They abandon their vehicles. Soldiers sprint toward nearby ditches and tree lines. But those areas were also part of the plan, because Ukrainian engineers seeded the escape routes with anti-personnel mines. Machine gun teams watch the same terrain from concealed positions. What looked like cover becomes another trap. Above the battlefield, thermal cameras track every movement. Heat signatures glow through smoke. Each cluster of soldiers becomes a new artillery target. Coordinates update. Shells shift. Explosions follow them into the mud. 3 minutes into the ambush, the next phase begins. A swarm of Ukrainian quadcopters appears overhead. Small, fast, deadly. Many carry shaped charges designed specifically for top attack strikes. The weakest armour on any tank sits on its turret roof. The drones dive. Russian soldiers fire rifles into the sky. Tracers streak upward. But the muzzle flashes give away their positions. Observation drones mark each flash. Artillery adjusts again. The kill chain tightens. Desperate to restore control, the Russian column commander increases his radio transmission power. He tries to cut through the chaos. But that surge of electromagnetic energy becomes a beacon. Ukrainian electronic warfare teams triangulate the signal. Accuracy within 10 meters. A loitering strike drone is redirected instantly. Seconds later, the drone plunges into the command vehicle. The explosion tears through the hull. The column loses its commander, and with that, the assault loses its brain. Russian artillery finally attempts to intervene. Guns positioned several kilometers behind the front-line fire suppression barrages toward the Ukrainian positions. But those shells never help the trapped column, because Ukrainian counter-battery radar is already tracking them. The ANTPQ-36 Firefinder radar calculates their trajectories mid-flight. Within seconds, the origin points of the Russian guns appear on Ukrainian maps. Counter-battery fire launches immediately. 45 seconds later, Ukrainian artillery begins striking the Russian guns themselves. Before crews can relocate, before they can fire again, the support artillery disappears from the battle. Back inside the corridor, the situation is already over. 6 minutes after the first missile strike. The assault column is gone. Burning tanks, destroyed troop carriers, smoke rising across a kilometre of road. The surviving infantry retreat through mud and shattered fields. Ukrainian forces do not pursue. They don't need to. The objective was never territory. The objective was destruction. In the hours that follow, reconnaissance drones film the aftermath. The footage spreads quickly through intelligence networks. Satellite images confirm the scale of the losses. What was supposed to be an elite assault force has become a roadside graveyard. The shock ripples through Russian command. Reports initially describe a localized setback, but imagery tells a different story. Entire armored units are razed in minutes. Russian commanders respond cautiously. Future columns move slower. Vehicles spread hundreds of meters apart. Reconnaissance increases. But that caution creates another problem. It slows every offensive operation. Logistics stretch. Momentum disappears. Because the real weapon in this ambush wasn't artillery, or drones, or missiles. It was information. Ukrainian forces saw the battlefield first, mapped it first, and built a kill chain that moved faster than the Russian command system could react. Modern war is no longer decided by who brings the most armour, or the largest army. It is decided by who can connect sensors, weapons, and decisions faster than the enemy can think. And when that happens, an entire armoured assault can vanish in 6 minutes. But here's the real question. If modern battlefields can erase armoured columns this quickly, does the era of massive mechanised offensives still have a future?